Your ACT practice tests are broken, and that's why your score on the real ACT is not where you want it to be. I got a perfect 36 on my ACT, and over the last 6 years, I've coached thousands of students to get to their dream scores as well. And over that period of time, I've seen all the mistakes that students make with their practice tests. And in this video, we're going to cover why your practice may not be translating to you getting to your target score. So if you want to avoid all the common pitfalls of ACT practice and you need to get up to your target score, then this video is for you. So I see tons of students out there doing what I would personally consider to be ineffective practice tests. Either their scores on the practice tests are great, but they're not translating over to the real ACT, or their scores on the practice tests are not great and they are translating over to the real ACT. And importantly, I've never actually seen a student score better on the real ACT compared to their best practice test. So improving our ways of practicing is incredibly important if we want to actually improve that real test score. And so if you're making these mistakes on your ACT practice, you're wasting your time, you're not going to achieve your potential on the test, and you're missing out on getting into the best colleges and earning the most scholarship dollars by improving your ACT score. On the other hand, if you learn how to master your practice tests, it will translate to that better ACT score that you really want, which will get you into your target school and earn you the scholarships that you're looking for. So now let's get into exactly why your practice tests are broken and exactly what we should be doing in order to fix these broken practice tests. And so first off, this is an obvious one, but you might be taking unrealistic practice tests, and that's why your scores aren't translating over to the real thing. If you're using non-official ACT practice tests, like ones that are just created out of thin air by random companies out there that aren't associated with the ACT themselves, then what they're doing is they're just trying to copy and simulate what the ACT questions actually are, and nobody has ever done a good job of doing this. So if this is the case and you're taking these practice tests, you're actually learning the wrong things and you're just wasting your time by not actually using real ACT practice. And while I think that studying by just using the ACT official prep booklet is not a great way to do things either, I think that if you're using a non-official study guide, then you're just way worse off, and this might be what's keeping you from your target score right now. And aside from using unrealistic practice questions and practice tests, the other thing that might be unrealistic about our practice is the way in which we're taking it. So even if we do have realistic ACT practice tests, if you're not simulating the testing conditions to the best of your ability, then it doesn't really matter what type of practice you're doing, because that score is not going to improve when it comes to the real test. So the way that we should be taking our realistic ACT practice tests is simulating the testing environment as much as we can. So we should be taking these tests at or around 8 a.m. just like we will be on test day. We should be timing ourselves using the exact timing that they're going to be using for us, and we should not be just like looking at our phone to try and keep track of time. If you have a watch that you're going to be using on test day, use that watch, but don't just like tap on your phone whenever you're trying to figure out how much time you have left, because you will not be able to do that on test day. You should be taking the test all at one time and one sitting rather than splitting it up into multiple days. And you should also be printing out the test and printing out your bubble sheet, because that's what it's going to be like when you sit down to take the real ACT. For example, I recently had a student named Rachel, and before we started working together, she was making almost all of these mistakes with her practice tests. She was actually using realistic practice tests, which was good, but she was making all of these mistakes. She was taking these tests at random times throughout the day. She was actually splitting them up and taking like 1 or 2 sections at a time, and then taking the next couple sections the next day or a couple days later. She was not keeping track of her time using a watch or anything like that. She was just, again, tapping on her phone, looking and seeing exactly how much time she had left. And most importantly of all, she was not printing out the bubble sheet, and she was not filling in the bubbles. So what she was doing was she was actually printing out the test, circling the answers, and just moving on, which made it seem like she had a lot more time than she actually did. If you think about it, when you have to fill in all of the bubbles, that takes an extra 5 minutes or so at the end of the test. So that's 5 minutes of wasted time on the real ACT that you're not accounting for during your practice tests. Again, we need to be practicing like we're playing, just like a good athlete does. They simulate the game environment as much as possible so that everything is second nature to them when it comes to the real game. We need to be doing the same thing with our ACT, simulating the testing environment as much as we possibly can. And if you listen to Rachel's own words, she was making all of these mistakes, and that was one of the ways that we improved her from a 30 all the way up to a 34.
So before I started meeting, I had a 30 with all the like practice tests and stuff, but then after our preparation, a couple months probably, I got a 34.
And so that pretty much covers all the reasons why your practice tests might be pretty high, but your real ACT isn't matching those practice tests. Now let's see why your practice tests might be low and your real ACT score is also low. And I see students making this mistake all the time. This is probably one of the most common mistakes out there. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier with the official ACT prep guide, but what a lot of students do is they'll take these realistic practice tests, and then if they review their answers at all, which they definitely should be reviewing their answers, all they're doing is they're looking at those incorrect answers and then seeing what the solutions guide has to say about how to solve that one correctly. Now, the problem with doing this is that the solutions guide is just spoon feeding you the correct answer, and you're not actually going through the process of learning how to solve that question on your own. If you're just looking at an incorrect answer that you picked, and then you're looking at the solutions guide to tell you the right way to do that, there's no way that you're going to remember the right way of approaching that problem the next time you see a very similar question type on the ACT. And this is basically the same mistake that I see students making when they're hiring an ACT tutor, because that's really all that ACT tutors do as well, is they make you feel good and they make you feel as if you're going through the process of improving by reviewing all your practice tests with you and telling you exactly how to solve all those incorrect answers. But that's not the true process of learning. In order to actually learn, you need to have a way of solving that question the next time that you see it with no guidance, because that's how the real ACT is going to be. You're not going to have the solutions manual to tell you what to do, and you're not going to have your ACT tutor there telling you exactly what to do either. So here's what you should be doing instead of that spoon feeding process. You need to have somebody show you what different question types look like, and then you need to practice on your own recognizing those specific question types. So if that's a big picture question on the reading section, you need to know what to look for in those questions. If that's a yes, yes, no, no question on the science section, you need to know, okay, what signals that this is even a yes, yes, no, no question on the science section. And once you practice recognizing those question types, you need to come up with the most efficient way of solving those question types. And again, this could be having somebody point you in the right direction and show you how to solve that, but then you need to practice doing that on your own without having that person spoon feed you the correct way of doing it every single time. Of course, this could also be done completely on your own. You just need to do a good job of coming up with your own way of solving each question type that's most efficient for you. So basically, there needs to be some combination of practice tests and review of those practice tests, but the difference with doing it correctly versus incorrectly is whether or not you have that solution spoon-fed to you compared with actually going on your own and learning how to recognize a specific question type and the most efficient method of solving that question type. Now, another mistake that I see students making on practice tests is that they're actually trying to prepare for both the ACT and the SAT at the same time. Now, this is a super common misconception out there because these tests are somewhat similar and everyone kind of thinks of them as the same exact thing, but the preparation process for these two different tests is not the same, and trying to do both at the same time is actually a great example of trying to take one step forward in one area where in reality you're just taking 2 steps backwards in that other area. So if you're practicing for the ACT, you may start taking 1 or 2 steps forward on the ACT, but then next week all of a sudden start taking SAT practice tests and you start ingraining the right habits for the SAT, that will actually take away from the ACT because they're completely different strategies. There's completely different timing for each section of the test. There's actually different rules on the grammar section as well. The SAT has some different grammar that the ACT doesn't cover, and we can have different rules. Basically, I could get into all the specific differences, but I have an entire video dedicated to that. So check that out. It should be linked somewhere right here if you're interested in the differences. But at the end of the day, you need to pick one test to focus on at one time so that you're not spreading yourself way too thin and again taking 1 step forward in one area while at the same time taking 2 steps backwards in another area. So to recap what we need to be doing to practice for the ACT, we need to be taking realistic practice tests. We need to be doing this in a realistic practice setting that's going to simulate the testing conditions. And we need to not be spoon-fed the correct answers. We need to go through the true process of learning. And finally, we need to dedicate ourselves to the ACT and not distract ourselves with other strategies and other tests. Now, if this whole ACT prep process seems a little bit overwhelming and you want somebody to just take control of the entire process for you, then that's exactly what I do with my ACT coaching program. I work with a select number of students on an individual basis so that I can give everybody personalized attention and make sure that they do exactly what they need to be doing in order to hack the ACT and get to their dream score. If you're interested in taking out all of the guesswork in the ACT process, check out the description below this video where you can apply to join my coaching program. Or you can also go over to my Instagram page where I respond to all direct messages. And if you message me the word boost, that lets me know that you're interested in brainstorming a plan to get your student to their target score. Other than that, keep following along here on YouTube and over on Instagram for more free guides on how to improve your ACT score, and I'll see you in the next one.